Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be doing my lineup review for week 4, talking about my week 4 lineups, going over the slate, just recapping the slate, talking about some of the players that did really well, maybe the guys that I played have a lot of exposure to, those guys, if they did well, some guys that I had a lot of exposure to that maybe disappointed this week. We'll just recap the slate, talk about some of my lineups, and then at the end we will go over the showdown slate for Monday Night Football between the Chiefs and the Broncos. We'll talk about that after we do the recap. But before we do get started, guys, would appreciate it if you would drop a like on the video. It definitely means a lot, and if you are new to the channel and you have not subscribed yet, make sure you click that subscribe button down below so that way you will not miss out on any of my new videos. So we'll start off on DraftKings, look at some of my DraftKings lineups, make about 20 lineups on DK, about 20 on FanDuel, and then I play 10 lineups on Yahoo in their tournament. We'll go DraftKings, then we'll go to Yahoo, then we'll go to FanDuel at the end. Starting off with DK, it was a pretty solid week on DraftKings. I had a lot of exposure to a lot of the guys that did really well. Some of my highest exposed players were Kamara, Melvin Gordon, Gio Bernard, Sterling Shepard. Even though he was popular, I still played him in a lot of in a lot of lineups. Tyler Boyd. That just shows you guys that if a guy's going to be high owned, you can still play him. You can still have high exposure to him. If a guy's a good play, I'm not going to fade him just because he's going to be popular. We knew Shepard was a good play. Evan Ingram was out. The targets were going to be there. He was 4,900. Tyler Boyd, kind of the same thing. We've seen Boyd just have a connection with Andy Dalton. He's getting too many targets to be as cheap as he was. Boyd was getting like 8-9 targets a game, and he was 4,700 still. He was too cheap. Like Andy Dalton was 5,400. We've seen him just continue to play well. It was a shootout game. It was in a dome. Dalton just made a ton of sense this week. I know he was kind of popular, but he was still a good play. 28 DraftKings points from him. Kamara, I don't really need to explain. Kamara's just, he's a beast. If you can fit him in, you have to play him in your lineups. The dude's just so good. Melvin Gordon, the same thing. Home favorite against a bad 49ers team. Good game from Melvin Gordon as well. Hit on a lot of the right plays this week. Boyd, Shepard, Kamara, Melvin Gordon. Those were some of my highest exposed players. Some of the guys that I have a lot of exposure to that busted, definitely Tevin Coleman was a big one. I had a lot of Tevin Coleman, and he only put up 10 DraftKings points. Had a decent amount of Drew Brees as well. I thought the Saints were going to be able to put up points, and they kind of did. It just didn't come from Brees. Kamara really handled all the work and just put up all the points for the Saints. So Brees didn't do that great. It was a disappointing game from him. Did have some Michael Thomas exposure, but I think I only played him in one lineup. I just didn't like the price for Michael Thomas. I knew I wanted exposure to him. I didn't want to full fade Michael Thomas in 20 lineups. So I did play him in one where I stacked him with Brees, and that was definitely one of my worst lineups on the slate. But just scrolling through, looking at some more lineups. Deshaun Watson, another guy I had a lot of exposure to. He did pretty well. Some of the Texans receivers did well. Will Fuller not as great because he got hurt in the early on in the game. I think in the second half or like the start of the second half. Will Fuller got hurt, which was disappointing. I did have a lot of exposure to Will Fuller, but I did have some exposure to Hopkins as well, and Hopkins obviously had a great connection with Deshaun Watson. That quarterback stack, I talked about it in my Week 4 video. It did really well. Watson to Hopkins. Had Tyler Boyd in my 5 plays as well. Had Shepard in my 5 plays. Melvin Gordon in my 5 plays. So those 5 guys really crushed for Week 4. If you guys listened to the video, you probably had a pretty profitable week, I would imagine. We hit on a lot of good plays. Gio Bernard as well, I mentioned in the video, I thought he was a really good option. I think I wound up having like 70% exposure to Gio Bernard, like 70% to Shepard. Tyler Boyd, I think, was like in the 60s or low 70s. I was just really high on those guys. I thought they were really good plays. They just made the things work I wanted to do in my lineups. If I wanted to pay up for someone in my lineups, then those were the guys that I looked to for value. And obviously, when your value plays crush value, then it's probably going to be a profitable week, even if they're really popular. But looking at some of my other lineups, Matt Ryan, another quarterback I had some exposure to, he did pretty well. I know I had a lot of game stacks of that game. I think, like this lineup had Ryan, Bernard, Coleman, Green, and Julio. This lineup, Ryan, Bernard, Coleman, Boyd, Julio. So had a lot of exposure to that Cincinnati-Atlanta game just in general. Gronk, I did have some decent exposure to Gronk because I didn't feel like anybody was going to play him, and I thought this was kind of going to be a Gronk week where maybe Gronk scored twice. Obviously, it was not. Gronk really disappointed. Gronk hasn't been good at all this year besides Week 1. Gronk's been really disappointing. But just looking at my last few lineups, Eli Manning was a guy that I did land on in a few lineups. Didn't have a ton of exposure, I think like 10%. I thought Eli could actually put up a pretty solid game here. I thought that game would shoot out. Didn't happen, so those Eli lineups kind of disappointed. But still some high scores. This one had a 178 with Eli in it. I think one of these lineups had like a game stack of that game. Had Eli to Odell in this one. Eli to Shepard in this one. Eli to Shepard, brought it back with Kamara. So I did like that game as sort of a possible game stack. Eli, Odell, Shepard in this game or in this lineup. So just looking through some of my other ones, I did get on Andrew Luck a little bit because I felt like that Texans game was going to shoot out, and it did. Andrew Luck did pretty well, even though people have been saying that he can't throw the ball or he just can't throw the ball deep. Guy's still a good quarterback. He's still good for fantasy. He was cheap. He was at home. It was a good matchup. In this lineup, I kind of did a little stack of that game. Luck to T.Y. On the other side, played Will Fuller and had Zeke. Sony Michel was another cheap guy that I liked with Rex Burkhead out. Michel put up some decent points. Tyler Boyd, obviously. Ebron, tight end. I think he was my highest exposed tight end. He did okay. Jared Cook, I landed on in a few lineups, but not a ton. He was one of the better tight end plays of the week with 34 DraftKings points. But looking at some of these lineups down here, Dalton to Tyler Boyd in this lineup with Kamara. This was a pretty chalky lineup somewhat. Dalton, Elliott, Kamara, Allison, Boyd, Shepard, Njoku, DJ, Eagles. Defense, 207 DraftKings points from that lineup. This was another chalky lineup, or just a lineup that had guys in it that were high owned. Dalton, Kamara, Boyd, Ridley, Shepard, Eifert, Gordon, Bears, Coleman. This lineup put up 216. Another pretty high-scoring lineup, 200 from this one. You can see just kind of like a similar core. Dalton, Shepard, just a lot of the guys I've already talked about. I had just in a lot of lineups. Shepard in this one. So Sterling Shepard, big play this week that did really well. Allison was a guy that I got on once we got the news that Randall Cobb was going to be out. Did get some exposure to Geronimo Allison. Originally, in one of these lineups that did really well, I think it was my lineup at the top up here. One of my highest scoring lineups had 225. I think I originally had Ridley and the Buccaneers defense, but once we got the news that that Randall Cobb was going to be out, I switched from Ridley to Allison, then upgraded defenses from the Buccaneers to the Bears. Not really sure how that 2v2 would have went, but this was one of my best lineups of 225. Had some other ones down here with 200. There are some lineups that really disappointed. Or actually, this was my best lineup of 227. Dalton, Bernard, and Tyler Boyd. Brought it back with Calvin Ridley, then had Kamara, Shepard, Njoku, Melvin Gordon, Bears D. So that was actually my best lineup at 227. But did have some disappointing lineups, some lineups that just really busted. I think there was like some 130s in here, if I can scroll and find them. Let's see, 200, 193. Oh, there was a lineup towards the top. Yeah, like a 130 here. Breeze with Michael Thomas. Just a bad stack that didn't work. Kevin Coleman busted. Michelle did well. Boyd did well. Shepard did well. Saquon Barkley did okay. Eifert got hurt mid-game, which kind of disappointed. He was on his way to a big game. And then the Buccaneers defense. I kind of landed on the Buccaneers defense in a lot of lineups because they were really cheap. They were facing Trubisky, who I don't think is a good quarterback, who will turn the ball over. But I just didn't really think about this play. Like, the Buccaneers defense is just so bad. They even made Trubisky look good. That's just how bad this defense is. So I probably shouldn't have played the Buccaneers defense. I felt like Trubisky was going to throw a few picks, but that did not happen. The dude went out and just torched the Bucs. But I think that's it for DraftKings lineups. Let's go ahead and move on to Yahoo. Look over these real quickly. It was another pretty profitable week on Yahoo. Played 10 lineups in their big 125K tournament. It's a 10-entry max tournament. I max enter this thing every week. It's a great tournament, especially if you're trying to build a bankroll. If you play $100 or more on Sunday, you should definitely be playing on Yahoo. Get 10 lineups in this tournament. It's just easy money. It's easy to cash on Yahoo. It's 10-entry max, so everybody has a fair chance. I think I cashed 8 out of 10 lineups in their big tournament. This one cashed Watson to Hopkins. Brought it back with Bernard. Or not brought it back, but played Bernard, Coleman, Boyd, Allison. Kind of a chalky lineup. Melvin Gordon, Eifert, Chargers D. Next lineup, I think this one cashed as well. Dalton, Bernard, and Tyler Boyd. Had Michelle, Julio, T.Y., Jared Cook, Kamara, Chargers D. Just kind of the same guys that I was on DraftKings. I play on Yahoo as well. This was one of the ones that did not cash. Breeze to Michael Thomas. Pretty much any lineups I had that stack, those lineups did pretty poor. but I had Bernard, Michelle, Landry, Shepard, Cook, Connor, Patriots D in this lineup. This lineup did well. Ryan to Ridley. On the other side had Tyler Boyd in that game. Then played White, Kamara, Galladay, Zach Ertz, Saquon Barkley. Raiders D. I did like the Raiders D on Yahoo. They were min price. They were at home. They were facing Baker Mayfield, rookie quarterback. Felt like there was Baker Mayfield. I thought he was going to have a good game, but I felt like he would throw a couple picks. That kind of happened. I mean, the Raiders allowed 42 points, but they got a pick six, and that's really all you need from your defense to put up a solid game. They were like $10 on Yahoo, I think. Yeah, $10, which is the minimum price. So I landed on the Raiders defense in a lot of lineups. But the next one, Watson to Fuller, just sort of had the similar combos. Watson to Fuller, Dalton to Boyd, Dalton to A.J. Green. Just those were the stacks I really landed on. Bernard pretty much played him in almost every lineup on Yahoo. He was way too cheap, and it was easy to fit him in. Or you played him, then it was easy to fit in Kamara, who was really expensive. But if you played Bernard, who was cheap, you played like Tyler Eifert was a cheap tight end. Geronimo was cheap. It allowed you to get in Kamara and Melvin Gordon. That's kind of what I did in this lineup. Jammed in Kamara and Gordon. Then I had Bernard for cheap, Geronimo for cheap. Sanu was a cheap play I kind of liked. And then landed on Watson to Fuller with the Raiders defense, which was also very cheap as well. This lineup had Luck to T.Y. with DeAndre Hopkins on the other side. Then had Bernard, Coleman, Boyd, Gronk, Shepard, and Raiders defense again. This lineup, Rivers to Keenan Allen. Felt like Rivers was going to have a better game than he did, but still solid with 22 fantasy points. But had Rivers to Keenan Allen, then Bernard, Kamara, Gabriel. This is one lineup where I did play Taylor Gabriel just because he kind of fit. Felt like he was going to have a decent game. I obviously did not expect him to have this 27-point outing. If I knew he was going to put up 27 points, would have played him in more lineups. But he was close to the minimum on Yahoo, just allowed me to get in what I wanted. That was the only lineup I played Gabriel out of the 50 lineups I played in total. But yeah, this was another lineup that did somewhat well. Next lineup, 154, sort of a similar score. I don't think this one cashed actually, because I think it like the three. You have to land in like the top 3,000th or something to cash. This one was close. Had Brady to Gronk, Gio, Kamara, Boyd, Allison, just same guys I've kind of mentioned already. Stick to a tight core. That's usually what I do. Ryan to Julio with Boyd, Bernard. Then I had Melvin Gordon, James Conner, Geronimo, Jared Cook. Pittsburgh D. Did land on a lot of Jared Cook on Yahoo because he was really, really cheap. One of the cheaper tight ends that I did like. But then my final lineup on Yahoo had Dalton to Green with Coleman, Kamara, Calvin Ridley. This was one of my worst lineups. One of the lineups that didn't do that well. Dalton to Green with Coleman, Kamara, Ridley, Allison, Eifert, Connor. And Pittsburgh D. I did land on a lot of James Conner on Yahoo because he was still way too cheap, I felt like. But Conner's really been disappointing lately. We'll see who the Steelers play week 5. If we can go to Connor, we'll see what his DK price is. We'll talk about that in my week 5 video. But on Yahoo, he was still inexpensive. I really liked him, and kind of disappointing game from James Conner. But let's go ahead and move on to FanDuel. Look at my FanDuel lineups real quickly. I played 4 lineups in the bomb, cashed 2 out of 4. Was a decent week on FanDuel, made a little bit of money. Wasn't like an exceptional week, but a decent week. So these were the 2 lineups that cashed in the bomb. This was one of my better lineups on FanDuel. It had a 188 with Watson to Hopkins in that game. Then had T.Y. on the other side. Then just had the guys that I've been talking about all video. Kamara, Bernard, Eifert, Boyd, Shepard, Chargers D. This lineup, Dalton to A.J. Green, stack with Bernard on the other side, or with Bernard as well. Then on the other side had Julio, had Tyler Eifert. So this was kind of like a full bingo stack with Dalton, Bernard, A.J. Green, Eifert. Then Julio, had Kerryon Johnson in this one lineup, Sterling Shepard, Kamara, Buccaneers D. So those were the 2 lineups that cashed in the bomb. Now we'll look at the ones that didn't do well. 155, this one had Ryan to Julio with Boyd on the other side of that game. Kamara, Michelle, Kenny Galladay, David Njoku, Saquon, and Buccaneers D. Landed on the Buccaneers D a lot on FanDuel because they were so cheap. Did not really do well there. Picking defense at least, but then this lineup, another lineup that didn't do that great. Breeze with Kamara, then Gio, Odell, Geronimo, Tyler Boyd, Ebron, Shepard, and Browns defense. Then my 20 lineups that I always play in their 20 max tournament did pretty well in the 20 max. I think I cashed 12 out of 20. We'll start off looking at the highest scoring lineup I had, 185. We'll go through these really, really quickly since it's 20 lineups. I'll just kind of I mean, you can see it's the same guys I've been talking about all video. Just Boyd, Kamara, Watson. Just these are the guys I had the most exposure to. The guys that just did well. We'll look at the ones that didn't do that great. See where we made some mistakes maybe. Like this one had a 103. This one was a Brady to Gronk lineup that did not do well. This one was like a 107. Breeze to Thomas. Like I said, those Breeze to Thomas lineups didn't do that great. Watson to Fuller, Saquon, Gio, Thomas was a big bust in this lineup. Jarvis Landry didn't do that great. But yeah, you can kind of see on my FanDuel lineups kind of stuck to the same core as well as what I had on DK. So that's it for FanDuel. I think that's it for my lineups in general. Let's go ahead, move on to the showdown slate for Monday Night Football. We'll talk about this game real quickly, talk about some of the plays that I like for this showdown slate. So obviously, up top, we're going to have Patrick Mahomes, going to be the most expensive guy on the showdown slate. And a big question for me going into the showdown slate, is Mahomes worth the salary? Is he going to put up 30-plus fantasy points? Honestly, I don't know. It's not the best spot going into Denver, Monday Night Football, having to play the Broncos on the road. I know the Broncos defense isn't as good as it used to be, but this is still sort of a tough spot for the Chiefs and a tough spot for Mahomes. But this game does have one of the highest totals we've kind of seen in a while. I think it has close to a 60 total. Points are going to be scored in this game, so if you can fit in Mahomes, I like him. And I do like Mahomes. I think I can fit him in. We'll talk about some of the value that we could possibly consider. I think if you can fit in Mahomes and Tyreek, you definitely want to do that. I do like Keenum on the other side. I think Keenum's going to have a really good game, and he's somewhat cheap. If you play him in your flex, he's only 9,800. I do like Keenum in the showdown slate. I like playing Mahomes to Hill, then maybe run it back with Keenum. And then we'll kind of talk about some of the value I like. But like looking at some of the other these mid-tier plays we could possibly talk about, Sammy Watkins feels a little bit too cheap. He's been really involved in this Chiefs offense. I think we could possibly consider him at 7,400. There's definitely value I like. Royce Freeman's only 4K. Should see at least probably 15 touches, maybe close to 20 touches. Week 1 against Seattle, he saw 15 carries. Week 2 against Oakland, 8 carries, 1 target. Week 3 against Baltimore, 13 carries, 1 target. So we're going to get probably 10-plus carries, a couple targets for Royce Freeman. And he's 4K, really, really cheap. Could be a guy that we look to. Definitely don't mind him. Phillip Lindsay's another running back the Broncos have involved in their offense. He gets some pretty decent amount of carries as well. 15 carries week 1, 14 week 2. Then only got 4 on week 3 against Baltimore. But he did get ejected in that game is what it looks like, because I don't know what happened. I think he punched somebody in that game. But maybe since Lindsay, maybe because of a discipline action or something, he doesn't get as much playing time this week. Maybe Royce Freeman becomes one of the better values. Also, a guy that I think we could go for cheap is Devontae Booker, especially if you think Denver is going to be trailing in this game. Devontae Booker is the guy that the Broncos use for pass-catching situations. He is pretty much their pass-catching back. And I think the Broncos are going to be trailing in this game. I think they're going to be playing from behind, having to throw. So Devontae Booker as a cheap option, only 1,800 on DK. Really good value if you want to go down there and look to him as sort of a GPP flyer that could potentially put up a really big outing for that salary. I like him for value. Also really like Cortland Sutton. He's only 3,600. Another value play we could possibly consider. I'm going to be targeting the Broncos, their pass game, because they're going to be playing from behind, I feel like, and going to have to throw. They're going to have to throw in order to keep up with this Chiefs offense that just continues to put up points every week. The Chiefs defense, on the other hand, has not been very good, so I think it's going to be pretty easy for both of these teams to score in this game. And that's probably why it has such a high total. But Cortland Sutton, another guy we can look to. He's really cheap. He's getting targets every week. I can project him for 5 to 6 targets, maybe even more. And at 3,600, definitely a good value, especially if he falls into the end zone. 10, 15 DraftKings points from Sutton is great value on these showdown slates. We know to play Mahomes. We know to play Tyreek Hill. On these showdown slates, it's really all about finding that value play, finding the Aldrick Robinson, the guy that's going to catch 2 touchdowns. It's really, really cheap, and that could potentially be Devontae Booker or Cortland Sutton, in my opinion. So those are 2 values I like. You can play Mahomes, obviously. You could definitely still play Tyreek Hill if you were to play this lineup. You could pair Mahomes with Hill. You could probably play Case Keenum as well. Going with Booker, Sutton allows you to do a little bit, sort of construct your lineups how you want to. But I think that's it for the showdown slate. This was obviously some quick analysis of the showdown slate, but since I took a lot of time on the lineup review, I didn't want to keep you guys for too long. So hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully this video did help you. If you enjoyed the video, I always appreciate it if you guys leave a like down below. Let me know how your week 4 went. Leave any comments down below. Always up for feedback. Always like to listen to your feedback. Just read comments, see what you guys have to say. So let me know down in the comments any guys that you did well, that did well for you. Maybe some guys that disappointed. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Drop a like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter if you haven't already. We'll see you back again on Tuesday for my Week 5 NFL DraftKings Picks video. Peace, guys.